What's up, y'all? It is Mrs. Madsen, and today we are going to compare and order fractions and decimals. We're going to be able to put them in order or get two and do the little alligator symbol. So, start with the very first tip to make it as easy as possible for you. The first tip today is to ignore the fractions completely and the decimal and just look at the whole numbers in front. Okay, if we just look at the 6 and the 5, who cares about all of that? 6 is bigger than 5. Boom! How easy is that? So before you do any of the other tips I'm about to give you, always look to see if the whole numbers are different. If they are, then your job is done. That's not always the case though. So let's go on to tip number 2. Tip number 2 is to compare to half. If you have a number that's way less than half and a number that's way bigger than half, well, then that's easy to compare. So let's think and let's review, like, what are some fractions that are way less than half? Like 1/9, right? If I have a candy bar cut into 9 pieces and I get one of those little pieces, that's a really small amount, okay? Or if you have a pizza cut into 12ths and you get like 3 pieces, that's also way less than half, isn't it? Yeah, because 6 halves is exactly half. So 3 halves is going to be way less than half. So another example might be like 2/7. Again, that's way less than half because 2/4 is exactly half. And then some fractions that are way bigger than half might be like 3/4, right? 3/4 is definitely more than half because it's almost a one whole. 7/8 is again almost a whole. Oh, give me another one. 9/10. Thank you. Okay. 100 1/50ths. I don't know, that's a terrible example. Something bigger than half. What you notice is that you have two numbers that are very close together if it's more than half. Two numbers that are kind of further apart from each other that's less than half. So if you can visualize two fractions, 2/5 is less than half, isn't it? I know that because 2/4 is exactly half, and this is a candy bar not cut into fourths, but cut into fifths. So there's even smaller pieces, and you're only getting two of them. So this one is less than half. And then this 3/4, like I just showed you, is more than half. So I definitely know that the alligator is going to be going for the 3/4 because it's a much bigger piece. So if you have two numbers that one is below half, one is greater than half, do it. If you have two numbers that are both bigger than half, then I've got another tip for you. My third tip is just to change everything to decimals. Once everything's in decimals, then you can line up those decimals like you've done in the past. Remember that this repeating bar just means that these two numbers, whatever's below it, is getting repeated over and over and over again. So if we're going to compare these two numbers, they both have 0 whole numbers. They both have 1/10. They both have 6/100ths. But then if we look in the thousand spot, we're comparing a nothing or a 0, right, to a 6. Like these are all zeros. So then we can see, oh, all right, well, 6 is bigger than nothing. So the alligator will go for the slightly larger one. And then here we're going to remember that, oh, look, that one's little. It's short. It must be smaller. You'll be like, no, 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 Mrs. Madsen. Remember, just because a number is shorter doesn't mean it is smaller. We have two zeros there, but then if we look in the tenths, one is smaller than two. So two is bigger. Plus, you can be like, oh, just Mrs. Madsen, add some zeros. You can see that 2,000 is bigger than 1,259. So the alligator is going to go for the bigger one. Okay, so those are my 3 tips for you. My final tip is if you have both fractions and decimals, just change it all to decimals, and then you can line those up. So with this example right here, we have one fraction, one decimal, and one fraction. We're going to change this to a decimal so then we can line it up. Now, you could fraction hating troll that, right? Or you could already have it memorized. I told you in the last video that you're going to see these 5 fractions over and over and over again. This is just the first place. You're going to see it tons more times in these videos, and as you are practicing for all of chapter 2 and continuing on in 6th grade, you're going to see these fractions. So if you just have that memorized, you know that it is 0.25, and you don't have to do this work at all. Now, this is not terrible work, but it is more work than just, than just having it memorized, right? So memorize those 5 fraction decimals. And then once you have it written down, you can line them up. They both have 8ths. They both have 2/10. This is where it's different. 8/10 is bigger than 8/100 is bigger than 5/100. So overall, 8 and 28/100 is bigger. Okay, so now let's go through those tips again and see what we can do to compare and order these from, well, order them from least to greatest. So remember tip number 1, look at the whole number. This has a whole number 1, this does not have a whole number, and this has a whole number 1. Well, because this doesn't have a whole number, then that is definitely the smallest number. Easy peasy, we got that one out of the way. Okay, tip number 2, compare it to half. So these are both 1 whole, so now let's look at the fraction. Well, 3/4 is bigger than half. 5/8 is also bigger than half because 4/8 is exactly half. So 5/8 is greater than half. So if they're both greater than half, we're going to have to go to tip number 3, which is change them to decimals. And then you can line them up. I have 3/4 memorized. I know that 3/4 is 0.75. Okay, now 5/8 I don't have memorized. It's not one of them that I'm requiring you to memorize, but you can start memorizing them if you'd like. I'm going to do my fraction hating troll, and I'll end up with, oh, not 3, how about 2 for 16. I'm going to have to move me out of the way a little bit. And I end up with 0.625. Now there is a 0 here, but I'm not going to leave it there because it's actually got a 1 in front. So I'm going to erase that 0 and put this 1 in front. Now when I compare, I can see that they both have 1 for a whole number, and it's in the 10th spot, that it is different. So technically, as I was doing all this over here, I could have stopped right, oh, that looks awful. I could have stopped at this point right here because look, it ended in a 6. And I already knew that 3/4 had it with 7/500. Okay, so I automatically could have known that at this point, the 1 3/4 is bigger. Okay, now the final tip for you is, even though I changed these to fractions, I'm going to make sure that I put them in my final answer back in their original format. So if they began in fractions, I'm going to put them back to fractions. Cool, huh? All right, let's do another example in our notes. We got 6/10, 2/3, 66/100. They all have no whole number, so they're all close together, aren't they? They're all between 0 and 1. Now, they're all greater than half as well, aren't they? 0.6, so we can't do that. Let's change this to the decimal, which is another, see guys, I'm telling you, those 5 fractions and decimals you're going to see over and over again. If you don't have it memorized, then you're going to have to fraction hating troll it, which will end up giving you 0.6, which will be 18, and another 0.6 will give you 18, and another 6, which will give you another 18, and it's actually going to go on forever and ever and ever. So now we can line up, now that they're all in decimals, let's line them up. We got 0.6, 0.6, 0.66, and I could keep going, right? Or I could just do the fraction bar, and then we got 0.66, no fraction bar. So comparing these, we have got 0 whole numbers. They all have 6/10. Ooh, in the hundredths, we have a winner for the smallest. 0.6 is the smallest because it has 0 hundredths. So now it's just looking at these. I'm going to rewrite those. The next two, the 0.66 repeating or just the 0.66. They look like they're identical, right? But because this goes on forever, because this is a repeating bar, I know that it will actually go on and on and on and on. And this one will just be zeros at the end. So we'll have to go in the hundredths, thousandths place to see that there's a difference, and the 0.66 is smaller than the 2/3. You see how I put 2/3 back in the fraction and didn't do the 0.66 repeating? So that is also something I want you to do. Cool. All right, I'm going to remind you, look at whole numbers. Then compare to half. Sometimes it works, most of the time it doesn't. But then change everything to decimals. It'll make your life easy that you can just line everything up. And to make your life even easier, memorize those 1/2, 1/4, 3/4, 1/3, and 2/3 because you're going to see them all over the place. Okay, final one. Let's see if you can put these 4 numbers in order from least to greatest. Good luck. See ya.